long ago, before X and Y were officially released, the story as we know it was dramatically different. Team Flare literally being aliens from space posing as men in black. Every single fairy-type Pokemon being from space, just like Clefairy, with the origin of most of them being the moon. And even how Professor Sycamore was originally planned to have a split personality, with Lysandre being his evil other half under the control of Team Flare. All of this and so much more had originally been lost to the past, but with Legends ZA on the horizon, I believe we will find some of these scrapped ideas being brought back in a new light. Especially now as we know Pokemon Z was originally planned for release, which would tell us the truth about Zygarde and Guzzlord's connection. Hi there, I'm Curlick, and not only will we be digging through what is known as the X and Y files and how lore has been changed, but we'll also be looking into these scrapped stories that could have been given to us that would entirely change everything we know about the world of Pokemon since we visited Kalos. The first time, that is. And we'll simply work through this piece by piece, talking about any pieces that have been reused in later generations or how it could have changed the world. We'll simply work through this piece by piece, talking about any pieces that have actually been scrapped and then reused in later generations and would have changed our understanding of the lore, and at the end, we'll tie in how all of this actually relates back to Legends ZA. Now, I am following what has been outlined by other people for this XY files, more specifically the Wiki Oddish, because this was originally a 4chan leak, and people have organized it nicely so that way I don't have to see all the things that you'd typically see on that website. You know how it goes, and if you don't, stay away from it. Keep in mind that this post was published in 2014, a year after X and Y's release, and seems to detail concepts reused in games years after 2014. It would be weird to call all of these instances coincidences when most of these mechanics are nearly identical to what they would actually become before they were revealed. And in the end, while many people have accepted that this is a true leak, it will be up to you personally to decide whether you believe it or not. The original plot of Pokemon X and Y had a much higher focus on space and aliens. Team Flare was intended to be much more alien, being aliens that posed as Men in Black-like characters that slowly took over Kalos and hunted for AZ. I kind of imagine them using the actual Men in Black movie thought eraser, memory eraser. Now you have to go rewatch the video 7 times. Pokemon storylines have involved the close hand of law enforcement slinking around in the background. You could see this through the International Police on the SSN in the original games, or even Looker, who was originally introduced in Pokemon Platinum and has been in most of the games since then, or at least hinted at. The idea of Men in Black would have been something we could have overlooked while playing the game, and even if we didn't, Team Flare kinda still had a really slow takeover of Kalos. Don't get me wrong, we still fought them, but they were kind of a joke, or they kinda just appeared and didn't always fight us. Their first appearance being in Glittering Cave as they're trying to take fossils until we stop them. Then they appear on Route 10, examining a mysterious rock formation. We know that in the official release, they're searching for any obelisks jutting out of the ground that would relate back to the ultimate weapon, which is eventually discovered in Geosenge Town. And throughout many of their encounters, they continue to investigate caves, any locations where Mega Stones may be found, and even if they don't fight us, they just appear again throughout Lumio City. Though this is because Lysandre has his own little cafe here, which secretly houses his lab. But we'll come back to Lysandre later, because now we can mention how AZ's Floette held the key, or rather flower, to a doomsday weapon set on destroying Earth, the ultimate goal of Team Flare. And there's a certain sneaky boy who's not going to be very happy with that, or should I say, a certain silly boy. This would then take the flower that Floette died with and turn it into something entirely new, because the flower as we know it was revived alongside Floette, given an eternal life, and is otherwise an incredibly rare flower that does not exist in the modern day. In addition, it's meant to symbolize Yveltal in its colors, while Floette symbolizes Xerneas in their colors, with one, if not both of them, both of those legendaries, being used in the process of firing the ultimate weapon.
once for restoring the life of Floette, and once for firing the Beam of Destruction. The first time as it was firing, it had to absorb the life energy of other Pokemon in order to revive Floette, bringing all of this bioenergy that they had and putting it into a new container, being Floette and the flower's bodies. The second time it would then be fired is, of course, for the Beam of Destruction that would end the Great Kalos War 3,000 years ago. Though even this would begin to change once we start to take the next idea into effect, because the newly introduced Fairy type was also intended to play a role in the plot, as most Fairy type Pokemon were intended to be aliens from the moon. Later in development, this plot was deemed strange and was later scrapped in favor for more mystical fairy tale-like elements. However, even this was scrapped to make development time for 3D models. And ultimately, when it comes to 3D models, there was a lot of work that was being done into it, and they knew it was just an incredible task to get all these models done. And the other part of this, which I'll mention now, is they were afraid of how the public would actually respond to Mega Pokemon. They didn't want to make too many, because making more means more production time, which means more money. And in addition to that, what if they flat out just did not like these Mega Pokemon? In which case, all this time was wasted, and they created extra ones for no reason whatsoever. And of course, you and I would understand that over the many years, Mega Pokemon are arguably one of the best or most favored Pokemon gimmicks that has ever been created. I am not considering regional forms a gimmick. That is just part of the world, and I love it, and I think that's personally the best. Nevertheless, as we get back into our plot here, the idea of Team Flare being an organization of aliens is very similar to what we would see in the future with the Ultra Recon Squad in Pokemon Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon. All of them being aliens from an entirely different dimension, devoid of light, as they now have blue tinted skin. They even try to pose as humans for a while, as they try and fail to properly give the Alola custom hello amongst quirks of their other behaviors. If you want to take it the extra step, you could say that the concept of a legendary Pokemon from space was repurposed into Eternatus, as it is a Pokemon from space itself, or you could say Ultra Necrozma as well, or any of the Ultra Beasts for that matter. All of them being incredibly tied to space, the concept of aliens, and more. And you've undoubtedly seen the many different times the moon itself was used as the home to a major antagonist, a major protagonist, or used as a sacred location within media. This in turn derives from Tsukuyomi, the moon god within Shinto religion, which itself focuses on the spirit of nature. Meanwhile, Tsukuyomi embodies all the positive things of the dark sky: spirituality, dreams, and energy balance. In Zen Buddhism, the moon symbolizes enlightenment. And you're likely thinking to yourself, then why in the world is this constantly represented by evil characters? Why does this tie into fairy Pokemon? What is going on here? And those are great questions, which we will thoroughly answer, since it holds a major point as to how the old plot and even future plot within Pokemon is going to be created and developed. Let's use some case studies so we can understand the full scope of this, because there have been a lot of twists regarding Tsukuyomi and the moon itself over the many years. The oldest that I can personally think of is Monster Carrot from the original Dragon Ball series, though his significance with the moon isn't fully revealed until Kid Goku takes him and his subordinates to the moon, where they are forced to make treats for children as punishment. It's an interesting punishment, but it was a fantastical adventure, as it liked to call itself. This is a reference to the rabbit on the moon, which is literally a shape on the moon that is often interpreted as a rabbit. The concept of the rabbit in the moon is prevalent in East Asian folklore, particularly in Chinese, Japanese, and Korean traditions. In these cultures, the rabbit is often seen as a symbol of selflessness and sacrifice. Now you understand why they're making treats for children. Selflessness and sacrifice, they're isolated from others, and they continue to give, even though this is a punishment. The most common depiction is of the rabbit using a mortar and pestle to pound ingredients, which varies by culture, though it may be making the mixture for immortality. We find the importance of the moon expressed in Naruto as well, even having a bit of a connection to what we know happens in Pokemon. We see this through the story of Kaguya Otsutsuki. In brief, Losing all faith in humanity but still longing for peace, Kaguya believed that it was necessary for her to attain godlike powers in order to put an end to all of humanity's conflicts. So despite her clan waiting to harvest that world of its god tree, she defied the taboo surrounding the fruit and decided to eat it. Using her newfound power, she single-handedly ended the wars and took control of the nations. For her deed of stopping the conflict, she received the blessing of the people and was worshipped as the rabbit goddess. She would even be sealed by her own sons with all of her chakra, and she would then become the celestial body that we know as the moon. Doesn't all of that sound familiar? Immortality, using great power to end a war, a new relation to space and the moon itself through this old lore that's coming up? And to bring more of this back to Pokemon, chakra itself is considered the center for life energy. I could bring up example after example of these concepts of godhood in space, life energy, and the moon, but I won't waste your time basically repeating the same information over and over again. Instead, we could take this established idea and connect it to both the scrapped and official lore of X, Y, Mega Evolution, and more. Now, we understand that the ultimate weapon used the powers of Xerneas and Yveltal, Xerneas being able to bestow life energy, and Yveltal being able to take life energy. It is often misunderstood that Yveltal is like the embodiment of death and kills everyone with its Oblivion Wing, when in fact it just actually takes the life energy, absorbs it into their body. This taking of energy is very different, as this means the energy is preserved. It is absorbed by Yveltal, so it can be used in the future, such as being redistributed by Xerneas to create new life or bestow immortality. This in turn means that AZ had harnessed not only the power of life and death itself, but the power of gods. This is something that is still clearly expressed within the canon lore of Kalos, as we see through the paperwork within Lysandre's labs. Directly from the information on the purple shelves in his lab, the king's younger brother told his progeny the location of the ultimate weapon and died. That is something to be used by sophisticated powers, not by humans. Human beings must create a world where such a weapon is unnecessary. And in tandem with those words from AZ's passed away brother, we have Lysandre, who notes something very similar but takes it upon himself to find and use the weapon. This world is stable and secure. The population of people and Pokemon continues to increase unabated, but there is a limit to the amount of money and energy the world is capable of producing. Either everything is lost, or only a handful are saved. This is something best not left to man. I must use a tool of higher power. In both of these scenarios, the ultimate weapon is considered a tool of higher power, something that should not be used by humans. This is their way of saying that this belongs to gods or some other form of celestial being far removed from humanity, their behavior, everything that they do. Something that should not be decided by mere mortals. But here's the thing. Remember what I said about fairy Pokemon being aliens, or how Kaguya is seen as an alien, and even in Dragon Ball Z, we often find aliens existing as gods or celestial beings? This all would in turn bring in all of those ideas of Team Flare and fairy Pokemon into the idea of them being celestial beings, especially when you remember that Xerneas is a fairy type Pokemon, now in this old lore coming from space itself. Because yes, in fact, originally Xerneas and Yveltal were originally meant to be of alien origin, being the source of a weapon intended to destroy Earth rather than a power source like in the final version. This really puts into perspective that other story from Kaguya, which is this idea of the world tree, eating the fruit of it, gaining the powers from it, becoming immortal, becoming all-powerful, and ending the war. Everything that AZ did. Now, with Xerneas and Yveltal, their colors, just as a fun little fact, were also swapped with each other. And the only reason this changed was because this would mean that it would mimic the original red and blue primary games. Either way, this would all lead into the idea that once again, we have a full god Pokemon, or actually multiple god Pokemon. Arceus, as we know it, is not the actual Arceus, but a piece of the true Arceus, as we see confirmed through the Pokemon Legends Arceus game. How many times can I say Arceus before it stops sounding like a word? Though the true full god form of Arceus has only been shown as a blindingly bright light. And while our focus is on the scrapped lore of X and Y, originally the intent of the movies and games once Arceus was revealed was to make them continue to be Arceus-centric, that everything would always lead back to Arceus and potentially a pantheon of gods. And we could see this through the Lost Dragon of Generation 5, alongside the unused Godstone that exists within it, and now these beings who control life itself in Generation 6, alongside the balance of it when we include the Peacekeeper and Protector of Earth, Zygarde. Which even this gets wild when we consider just how different Zygarde would have been if they kept the old lore. After all, Zygarde is always stated to be one of, if not the most major protector of the planet. That doesn't sound like good grammar, but either way. We don't really get to see this though until after the games of X and Y. But if they had kept this lore, where Xerneas and Yveltal are these major threats to entire planets, then Zygarde would have been pretty useful in defending the planet, and may have even done so in the past. Which will lead me into our next topic at hand. Something that may be incredibly vital as new stories are completed within the world of Pokemon. But once again, don't worry, I will continue to hold any Legends ZA speculation for the end. So our boy Zygarde was quite a bit different. In fact, Zygarde was supposed to be distributed as a mythical event Pokemon. That was until the company started getting a little bit scared of leaks happening, and the public kind of proved how bad leaks can really get over the last couple of years. But they decided to then remove Diantha from being a direct evolution to Carbink, made it a mythical, and then slam dunked Zygarde back into the game proper as a legendary Pokemon. And I've talked about the relation between Carbink and Diantha ad nauseum across my videos, but yes, with the two having so many million ties between each other, it's no surprise that they were truly supposed to be a singular Pokemon line and not a separated entity that evolves through a random mutation, similar to how Carbon turns into Diamond. I mean, we understand that it's, pressure that helps turn it into Diamond, but it still can just happen at a pop or happen over the course of a million years. It's kind of a toss-up. Though, Diantha has a whole bit of information that we'll talk about later in the ZA speculation section. For now, though, I bring up another piece of lore that is still kept in some capacity through both Kalos and Alola's games. Zygarde's alternate forms were originally supposed to be released in Pokemon Z, a game that in fact was in production. It is through the production of this game that we would have gotten to see its alternate forms intended to overwhelm Xerneas and Yveltal even more than it already does, at least in lore. Now, this information is sourced through CentroLeaks, who has been known to leak confirmed information, and while I usually stay away from leaks for games before they release, this little bit of past information can be incredibly useful for us understanding that these old scrapped mechanics and lore can and will be brought back in some capacity. In this case, Zygarde was originally going to have two complete forms. Form X was going to be based on a large wolf that would then hunt Xerneas as its prey, fitting in not only to the concepts of Fenrir, but also deer and wolf relationships. Meanwhile, Form Y was going to use anti-aircraft weaponry to hunt Yveltal. Both forms were then repurposed into the 10% dog and 100% giant monster, whatever you want to call it, forms. Not only this, but we would also find that Zygarde would still be specialized for taking down these other two major legendaries in the official release of the games. Kind of, in my opinion, being a cooler form of the Rayquaza situation, at least until the Mega form came in. Zygarde not only has its own ability to reverse the abilities of the other two, but also has its specialized attack, Thousand Arrows, to allow it to hit Yveltal, even though it is normally immune to ground-type moves, being a flying type, of course. This, in turn, acted as its own anti-aircraft attack. In the story, we would also be working alongside Cynia and Dexio more, which explains their role in Alola when they explain not only Mega Pokemon to us, but also the entrance of Zygarde into those games, connecting them even further. There would be a Zygarde-like rock found in their research lab, which they would call the Z-Stone. Whether this would be intended to be used similarly to the evil artificial Zygarde created by Lysandre in the anime, or simply be another Z-Stone typically found in Alola is unclear. Though from here we can understand that there are two cut plots. One for Pokemon Z, and one for Pokemon Sun and Moon. For Z, we would find out that Zygarde monitors Xerneas and Yveltal as they control the life energy of the Kalos region. That bit of information is incredibly interesting to me, because we have always kind of assumed that Xerneas and Yveltal are meant to just, control the life energy of the planet, maybe even further, if they are true gods of life and the cycle of it. Instead, they weren't supposed to control all of life. They would control Kalos. This lore has also been changed as we know it, since they can be obtained through an event in Oris and the Sun and Moon games, though they can also be obtained through the Ultra Space Wilds in Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon. Keep this in mind when we talk about officially released ZA information later. Otherwise, within this scrapped lore of Pokemon Z, Zygarde would appear when the balance between Xerneas and Yveltal are disrupted, and would fight whichever one it needs to in order to restore balance. It would act as a swarm and change at a whim in order to fight them at the maximum efficiency. So that isn't all too different from what we are aware of, though the largest difference there is understanding that Zygarde wouldn't build up, and we wouldn't be giving it cells to turn into its all-powerful 100% form. It would just have multiple forms that it could change between in order to meet its needs for the situation at hand. But what happens to the scrapped lore that we have had or would have had in Sun and Moon? We would get a message from Dexio stating that there is a beast in the End Cave you may as well know as Terminus Cave. Zygarde has thus arrived, having judged that the beast is a threat to the ecosystem. Not only does this explain Zygarde's presence in Alola, but also why we see Zygarde and Guzzlord within that cave between the games. A connection that many people assumed was a connection to show that Zygarde and Guzzlord are related to each other, that in some capacity, Zygarde became a corrupted form of itself and then turned into Guzzlord. Though I suppose this doesn't necessarily disprove that idea, it at least shows that no matter what, they were supposed to at least interact with each other. Of course, this is also assuming that the beast truly would have still been Guzzlord and not an entirely different Ultra Beast that is also a major threat to the ecosystem, as many of them can be, at least within our world, as invasive species trying to find their way back home and being scared and attacking others in its process of returning home. Though I don't think you can threaten an ecosystem much more than a creature that eats the literal rivers and mountains themselves and doesn't poop at all, making Guzzlord act as the end of everything it consumes permanently. No bacteria in that poop to thrive and restart that little miniature ecosystem. As the plot continues though, you would be told to go to End Cave with Zygarde in its complete form, discover the beast at the end of the cave, and witness just how eager Zygarde is to fight this beast, as the ball it is contained within begins to shake. You would then send out Zygarde and defeat this beast. Afterwards, what is known as a newly synthesized Zygarde would then consider us as its trainer, and we would keep Zygarde then on. And this is when I say, if you haven't seen the ZA trailers, just skip to the next section, because I'm about to talk about one of the great reasons why we see Zygarde in Lumiose right now. Because of the Mega Dimension. We know very little about this Mega Dimension. In fact, all we know is that Hoopa plays a major part in it and seems to be a big reason as to why Mega Stones are appearing, even revealing 2 new Megas in the forms of Mega Raichu for each, one of them looking very much like the scrapped design of Gorachu. the original evolution of Raichu before Pichu was introduced. The major reason why I bring this up is because through the scrapped lore where we find them in the official games, we can understand that Xerneas, Yveltal, and Zygarde would be at least familiar with there being multiple dimensions or alternate universes. When we take this into consideration, we can even then understand why there's such a connection between ORAS and Pokemon X and Y, as we learn about AZ visiting Hoenn and planting a sacred tree there, a tree of life. This tree would then become a place for Floette to rest and visit afterwards, as it waits for AZ to come to terms with what he has done and learn about the world around him, learning what it is truly like to be a trainer and love the people that exist in this world, to find that there are good-natured hearts that do exist, before Eternal Floette would eventually return to him by the end of X and Y. We also know for sure that ORAS comes before X and Y because of a number of different events. But an easy and prominent event is the creation of Mr. O of the O powers. We witness his transformation in Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire, and then we meet him in his full power and abilities within Kalos within the games of X and Y. Now, I've dug extensively into this, and there's a number of different other ways that we know for sure how the timeline works, and if you want to see that, I highly recommend my other video, which is talking about the Great War timeline, revealing who the people, or rather, the countries that were at war with Kalos, and so much more. But back to Kalos, more specifically New Lumiose, we see some strange things going on with Prism Tower. Most interesting about it is that the color that it is glowing is a magenta color, which in a color wheel is opposite to the green color that Zygarde would represent. Pretty strange that this magenta color would also be shared by a certain Diantha, isn't it? Though you may argue that Diantha is more pink, we'll come back to this idea later. For now, even if it isn't related to Diantha, we may see the return of some sort of beast that is now here in Lumiose City, rather than seeing it as it was originally intended to be in Alola, back with Pokemon Z, that is. Now, this creature could be an Ultra Beast, though it could be also something entirely different and relate back to that artificial Zygarde we see in the anime. I would even be willing to bet that it's Deoxys or one other potential creature that, again, I will talk about later. The only issue that I find with the artificial Zygarde theory is that artificial Zygarde within the anime is red. So only time will tell what the source of this phenomena really is. But how about we move on to some of the more dramatically changed lore? In the original story, back in that scrapped X and Y content, Sycamore and Lysandre were once the same person. In fact, Sycamore would still act normally in his professor role until Team Flare would arrive, causing him to change personalities and maybe even appearance, as he would then act as Lysandre. This was caused by Sycamore being exposed to a space rock sometime before the events of X and Y, resulting in this Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde situation he is now under. Furthering this issue, Team Flare would have been able to control him due to their own connection to rock and space itself. In the story we received, this feels incredibly plausible, actually. I say this because in the end, Sycamore was a very close friend to Lysandre. The two of them would talk plenty, and Lysandre had openly stated many of his plans and ideas to Sycamore. The professor admits after the main events of the game that he feels as though he's just as much to blame for what happened regarding Lysandre and Team Flare because of this, that he could have done something to help Lysandre and stop him from going through with his destructive plan that would have killed the majority of humans within the world. This is also to show something else that exists both inside the game and outside of it, that the understanding of Lysandre's view of the world is hard to deny. There are wars between the haves and the have-nots, the rich putting down the poor, and all the while, as populations continue to increase, resources like food, water, and shelter become scarcer and scarcer. We see this in the post-game of X and Y, with Emma having a story about being homeless before she is taken in and educated by Looker, teaching her how to read and eventually buying the building and giving her a home and the agency that she now runs within New Lumiose City. A story about someone who is very fortunate and has found a way to assist those in less fortunate situations, as Looker, again, changes Emma's life, and she is thriving now, clearly. A great alternative to this is actually seeing how Xerasic, or even Team Flare as a whole, used Emma. They used her as a test dummy for their own creations, their own technology, and their own money being put to use to take advantage of somebody in such a poor situation. And I don't think this is something that's going to go away because of our focus in New Lumios, in addition to seeing anti-homelessness benches within the city itself. But because Lysandre sees that the world will eventually tear itself apart as it grows and it fights over resources, he wanted to change it. The problem is that he decided he would commit mass genocide, and only chosen individuals would be free to live. Just a little close to the horrors of what happened in our real world during a certain world war, isn't it? Either way, the point stands that Sycamore and Lysandre had a very close relationship while still being two opposite sides of the same coin, both being incredibly intelligent, both having resources available to them, both seeing the world for what it is. The only real difference is the actions that they take in their own paths to help the world in their own ways. Lysandre, of course, making a very terrible decision. I'll even add that it is likely through this connection that Sycamore knew Mabel was a Team Flare member before she was brought in as the acting professor of the new lab. Whether acting professor is meant to say that she's there in place of Sycamore for now, or is becoming a full-fledged professor similar to how Sonia did or did become, or simply is that she is the new professor, all of this is up to question. Though there is one other that had a very friendly relationship with Lysandre as well, that being Diantha, the champion, who also had a major change from the scrapped lore to what we know. It is unknown if in this scrapped lore of X and Y, if she would truly still be the champion of the region. But in this alternate universe of lore, she is the benevolent leader of the fairy-type Pokemon, as she looks after Pokemon that have come from the moon. The information doesn't expressly state whether or not she came from the moon, but at the very least, she was the bridge between people and Pokemon. This is another idea we consistently see in the past few generations. In Generation 5, N was a leader of Pokemon as he could speak with them. He would even be considered one of the new great heroes of Unova. And before this, you could technically consider Cynthia to be another version of this bridge, but her connections are more so with being the first known person, other than ourselves within Legends Arceus, to have met Arceus itself, or at least one of its pieces. And I would bet that Diantha could have had a much larger role than what she seems to play within the games, because let's be honest, she doesn't really have that much of an impact. She kind of appears, we see her having a conversation with Lysandre for a bit, we talk to her for a short bit, and then we fight her as champion, nothing else in between whatsoever. She's just very absent from the game, and honestly, I would not be surprised if she simply did have this longer idea or greater part in the overall story that was then ripped away and never properly replaced. And while I would love to say that her clothing is very moon-inspired or moon-reminiscent, Diantha's design is modeled after Audrey Hepburn through and through, from hair to clothing and more, though we could still say the very pure white clothing could relate back to the moon. In addition, the fairy-type gym leader Valerie's design actually belonged to Diantha originally, the strange appearance playing further into Diantha's role as the leader of the fairy Pokemon. Her name is from the genus Dianthus, which is derived from the ancient Greek words Dios for Zeus and Anthos for flower. Also, Dio, God, kind of pretty straight there. Meanwhile, her Japanese name Karne, or Karn, is from carnation, and that flower's name origin being coronation. Something that is very fitting as we have a full coronation after becoming champion before AZ appears and battles us one last time. When I think of the Dios and Zeus, or Dio and God connection that we do have there with her name, it makes me think once again that Diantha may have originally been someone who came from space, someone who had a higher level of power, and may have been someone who had incredible influence in the ultimate weapon, or Xerneas and Yveltal as a whole being a ambassador of them both, trying to show that they could be good creatures by the end of that scrapped lore, though that is just speculation on my part. This, though, does bring me back to AZ, especially as there isn't too much solid ground to speculate on with Diantha within the games and the scrapped lore. AZ was intended to be an alien similar to Team Flare, sent to take over Kalos and destroy the Pokemon world. However, he had a change of heart upon meeting the Eternal Flower Floette. After this change to peace, he was exiled to Earth, wandering and aging slower than the humans of the Pokemon world. This would have been just massively different and completely eliminated the idea of the ultimate weapon being the reason behind his extended lifespan and the heights that he gained, potentially even changing the motivations of a number of different characters throughout this series from then forth. This would maybe even take away so much of the plot, stories, and ideas surrounding Xerneas and Yveltal being used for more than just destruction or immortality. And if I may, the lack of the two legendaries would also mean that at least one other confirmed disaster would never have been stopped, as Xerneas and Yveltal arrive from space and have not existed on the planet. This would mean that the Lentil region meteor, which was prevented through the assistance of the Illumina Pokemon, would have never been prevented, causing a great disaster. But that is a story I won't get into, as it doesn't really play that much of a part here that we know of. Instead, I want to mention that Floette originally only had the singular eternal form. Floette would be kept entirely separate from Flabebe and Florges, who in turn had more plant-like elements as part of them besides the flower, and were going to be grass fairy type Pokemon rather than the pure fairy types that they are. Floette was going to be AZ's signature Pokemon, but this was changed to advertise the fairy typing more. But what do we see in the more recent ZA games? Eternal Floette is with AZ, and I'm sure that every single human being interested in this game is willing to bet that we're going to see this Eternal Floette in battle, especially as there is a very special move that it uses that is in the game and usable, is programmed into the game, yet we can't legally get this Pokemon whatsoever. Kind of makes you think, doesn't it? Now, let me also tell you that Mega Evolution and Mega Stones were also originally going to be of alien origin, being part of a spaceship that AZ used to get to Earth. The designs were originally much more alien and played on DNA elements. This should once again sound very familiar to what we're seeing once more. But more importantly, the DNA elements idea is something that was brought into existence with at least 2 Pokemon and their Mega Evolutions directly. Allow me to actually read from the Pokédex entries so we don't mix it up with other people's interpretations of what happened. For Mega Aerodactyl, Mega Evolution awakened some dormant genes, bringing back the sharp rocks that once covered its entire body. For Mega Ampharos, excess energy from Mega Evolution stimulates its genes, and the wool it had lost grows in again. And while the other Dex entries for Mega Pokemon don't state anything about their genes or their DNA, we do get a lot of changes that evolve them further or take pieces from their previous forms and apply them to this new form. This even goes for new Pokemon that we are seeing within Legends ZA, as Dragonite has clearly stated that excess energy from Mega Evolution stimulates its genes, and the wool it had lost grows in again. That's wool? Why is that wool? Why is that not feathers? It kind of bothers me a little bit. My epiphany aside from this idea of DNA being altered by Mega Evolution was never fully scrapped and is continuing through Legends ZA at the very least, maybe into even further future games. In addition, it's not as though the idea of aliens went away from Pokemon at all, let alone fairy-type Pokemon being aliens. Clefairy, of course, being the #1 example, as even before it was changed to be a fairy Pokemon, it was already clearly stated to have originated from space. In the anime, they doubled down on this and gave it an entire episode dedicated to restoring its spaceship and returning back home, taking a human with them who we have not seen since. Being a filler character in an anime must really suck. This could have explained the Oris event known as the Delta episode, After all, this version of Hoenn has Mega Pokemon with a rich history regarding the Draconids and Rayquaza itself. When we take in the idea of DNA being altered, plus the Delta episode starring the DNA Pokemon itself, known as Deoxys, there may have been an even greater tie-in to the legendary and mythical Pokemon within the franchise. Otherwise, we continue to get examples in the future of Pokemon who have power over life energy, or at least at one point in time are considered to be deities to humans. We see this a lot within Alola, with not only Alola and Ninetales, but also all 4 of the Tapu Pokemon, each of them being embodiments of nature's power, as they are worshipped on each of Alola's islands, while also being directly inspired by old Hawaiian gods. We can even take a step back and look at Pokemon such as Morlul and Shiinotic, who can take and give life energy while also not just representing mushrooms and mycelium, but also looking like classic aliens in their own right while still holding that fairy typing. The Lost lore would have then very much tied together nearly every single fairy type Pokemon directly to Xerneas, as it represents the fairy Pokemon and the giving of life energy. Though the real question at hand is what this would then mean for all of our people from space. Would they be biologically related to Pokemon? Would AZ as an alien be considered part Pokemon in some capacity? This is a question we often find ourselves with regarding humans in the world of Pokemon. And while I think this would warrant its own video, I think it's important to note that there are a lot of details that point towards and away from humans being related to Pokemon, making it so much more complicated than it probably needs to be. For example, though, all of the abilities that Pokemon have could sometimes be seen in humans. Psychic abilities, greater levels of strength, and especially so when we look at individuals such as Coco, who used a Pokemon move, or when we look back at N, Ash, or the great King Harmonia himself, all of them, amongst many others, having the ability to talk to and understand Pokemon through and through, when not every single human in the world has the ability to do so. But then we take into mind that people can't be caught in Pokeballs, which only results in pain, as we see in Jessie's case within the anime. But alternatively, Ultra Beasts are still considered Pokemon, as regular Pokeballs have a very low chance of catching these Ultra Beasts. It's difficult, incredibly difficult actually, to know for sure, but it was something I wanted to bring up, as there is one other event that could have been tied into all of this, being the creation of Deoxys. But I think I want to talk about that in our theorizing section, alongside the effects of the ultimate weapon and how it firing may have split dimensions and timelines apart. I'll briefly touch on the gym leaders, or at least some of them, and how they've changed, because it could have had various impacts on the gameplay and lore, as always, as we understand it. For starters, our first gym was almost a ghost-type gym, as our journalist friend Alexa would be specializing in capturing photos of paranormal Pokemon. This in turn would have made her more involved with the plot due to her fascination with the paranormal. But a ghost-type gym was deemed too difficult for the first gym, and so we get her younger sister Viola there instead, who captures bug Pokemon with ball and camera. I would have genuinely absolutely loved this. I already like Viola quite a lot in terms of being a bug photographer, but to also have Alexa there and work alongside her would be so much fun. Honestly, working alongside anyone as we research and investigate the paranormal activities within the Pokemon world is just something that is right up my alley. I loved the Victreebel reveal. Now, there is one minor detail where all the gym leaders were supposed to be more sports-like, but that doesn't have any plot relevance. Instead, I will note, though, and why I bring it up, is because Galar was exactly that. A full set of gyms set within stadiums revolving around sports as a whole. Another concept brought back from the past from its scraps. Another detail that we can skip over mostly is that Bonnie and Clement were originally switched, giving us a super genius Bonnie and a younger brother Clement. But due to Clement's design being too Trevor-like, they switched Bonnie and Clement's roles and changed their designs. Though Olympia, as we move on to our next gym leader, who was one of the last gym leaders designed, was originally going to play a much bigger role in the plot, as well with Team Flare and the Legendaries. Her design was originally more androgynous, but was eventually made more feminine in the final release. Olympia is a very interesting one as is, and I was surprised to find out that she just never really did play a bigger role within the games. Her and many others for that matter. According to the television show Game Freaks within the canonical lore, anybody who placed their wrists into Olympia's bracelet will allow her to be able to see everything in their future. It also states that the inside of her cloak is a galaxy pattern creating zero gravity that increases psychic power. What I find interesting is that she bears on her team a Sigilyph, a Slowking, and a Meowstic, all being female. Sigilyph is also under the care of AZ, with these Pokemon being guardians that patrol ancient ruins typically and fire at anyone who may ruin their quality. They are an ancient creature that is often overlooked in Pokemon, but are very important to figuring out what used to exist wherever they are. The Meowstic isn't too surprising, as they are known to have so much psychic power that they could just grind a 10-ton truck to dust. Plus, they were introduced in this generation, so Olympia has to rep at least one of the new psychic Pokemon. And then the Slowking will of course hint at the high level of intelligence that Olympia may have. Ancient Guardian, incredible psychic power, and genius levels of intelligence. The perfect combination for what could have been a major character within a story. And once again, when we dig into the ideas behind aliens, gods, and celestial power, it would seem as though Olympia may have been the final step to understanding the aliens, the legendaries, and what is going on within Kalos. Her ability to see someone's future in its entirety or having power over gravity is bordering on godlike abilities, bridging that gap between mortal and immortal, though she doesn't use this for evil or to be vague, as she is rather very specific and honest as she reads others' futures. Though in the anime, in the episode championing a research battle, she speaks with Diantha about the threat that Kalos was to face in the future, showing her a vision of Zygarde. Though of course it wouldn't be the actual Zygarde that we know it that was a real threat, it would instead be the artificially created Zygarde known as the Rock, which was created by Lysandre. Despite all of this, she would then still play a vital role regarding the legendary Pokemon of Kalos, and it was just only portrayed within the anime and focused on Zygarde rather than the other two members of the Aura Trio. And while there are plenty of other mechanics that were repurposed in later generations, such as Ride Pokemon or Mega Pokemon as they were initially planned because there were supposed to be a lot more, I think it's time that we actually move into what we know about Legends ZA and get some good old deep theorizing here. I thoroughly believe most, if not all of this, comes back to the reveal of the Mega Dimension, a portal created by Hoopa that connects universes and allows Mega Stones to pass through them. Because of this, we have now received the new Mega Raichu X and Mega Raichu Y, with one of them taking more features from Pikachu as its evolution seems to work like some of our other Pokemon. In addition, we have a design that looks similar enough to the scrapped Gorachu design from long ago that it definitely is raising flags once again on the idea that scrapped Pokemon and concepts do come back in the future. We already know that AZ is going to play a much larger role in all of this alongside Zygarde, but to what extent is the question? After all, we've gotten so many different concepts that are still here, including the change of hearts idea that AZ did have thanks to Humanity and Floette. As a reminder, Prism Tower is glowing this magenta color within the newest trailer, which to me is very reminiscent of Diantha. Diantha wasn't supposed to be a mythical distributed by an event, but then Zygarde switched places with it, showing a hidden relation between them. Then we start to look at all these Mega Crystals appearing within the city and causing rogue Mega Pokemon to pop up and lose control. These crystals not only looking very similar to Diantha's own crystals, but also relating back to the Sunistar dial. This massive rock that is in Anastar City is discovered to have the ability to improve the Mega Ring and allow it to locate Mega Stones that may exist within Kalos. Though this can only be done between the hours of 8 p.m. and 9 p.m. being the times in which the rings spin and the sundial is active. And trust me, I really want to link this to Hoopa because of the similar color scheme and the rings around it. And who knows, considering we know Hoopa has the same color scheme, does have the same rings, and is now related to Mega Stones, there is a chance that Hoops is the reason behind the existence of the sundial. It may have brought it here, it may have influenced the power of it, and as such would explain why these Mega Stones are related to both of them. The only thing stopping me from confirming this is that this currently is a thing that just exists in the DLC, this whole Mega portal situation. Meanwhile, Prism Tower still glows that color that we would associate with either Diantha or Hoopa. Hoopa would also be a perfect opposite to Zygarde when we think about it, a creature that causes mischief and chaos by opening up wormholes to other dimensions, and a creature that is the protector of the balance of life on Earth. And this also goes a little bit further, as Hoopa is bringing Mega Stones and other Pokemon into our universe, which is very similar to what happens in Alola sans the Mega Stones. Which in turn may as well explain why the Kalos starters didn't get their Mega forms until now, because these portals are opening up, we didn't know about them until now, and it's all because of Hoopa bringing these stones in. And unfortunately, we might not get all of the answers until the DLC, or if Hoopa is even truly related to the main events of the story in any capacity. Which I assume it is, because you can't have a Pokemon related to the Mega Stones and not have us assume that it's been a part of this all along. I'm personally hoping that a combination of Diantha and Hoopa is what resulted in the advent of new Mega Stones and the rogue Mega phenomenon that is happening. In addition, the Mega Dimension itself may be related to Ultra Wormholes in some capacity. After all, if Hoopa is the one creating them, then we know that Hoopa can open portals between space and time to other dimensions, and we have full confirmation now. And while it's not creating the Ultra Wormholes, it may still be opening up wormholes or dimensions to other realities that would then allow more than just Pokemon or Ultra Beasts to enter. After all, I think there's a number of theories circling around now that New Lumios may actually end up becoming the Ultra Megalopolis that we see in Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon, a place devoid of light as its light is stolen by Necrozma. Either way, as such, there is the chance that as we enter the Mega Dimension, that we may encounter a number of other characters or Pokemon from alternate timelines, such as where the Fallers may go. People who have fallen from Ultra Wormholes ended up in new realities or dimensions and have lost parts, if not all, of their memory. And it is in this method that we'd find ourselves within the version of Hoenn within Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire. After all, it is mentioned time and time again that there are alternative diverging timelines within the world of Pokemon, and people have made video after video trying to actually organize them. Many people also agree that whether or not AZ fired the ultimate weapon is the moment in which the timelines split. The Mega Stones are created, and in another version they just simply aren't because the weapon isn't fired. This is because the events of Hoenn play out similarly, but not one-to-one when we compare the original games to the ORIS version of the games. The greatest difference, of course, being that Mega Stones exist and have been known to exist. They're not a new thing or a explained phenomenon that has been causing just chaos or otherwise worldwide. There isn't this confusion around them as we would expect, and to add to this, in the Let's Go games, we also have Mega Stones appearing despite the games canonically taking place roughly 2 years after the events of the original Red and Blue games as its own remake of Pokemon Yellow. The difference though is that at least within Hoenn you can find Mega Stones from sparkles on the ground. Many of these only appear though after the player defeats or captures Primal Groudon or Primal Kyogre. This could be just a mechanic to make sure you don't get every Mega Stone early, but I don't think so, because it could also be that Groudon Kyogre emerging from the earth resulted in these Mega Stones being uncovered and released upon the land in their explosive entrance. Evidence of this as a possibility for some of the Mega Stones is the Abomasnowite, which is found underground in Frost Cavern within Kalos, so it seems plausible. Meanwhile, within Sun and Moon, you don't find any Mega Stones in Alola at all. In fact, the only way to receive them is by defeating other important trainers such as Red or buying them at the Battle Tree. This insinuates that they are imported to the area. And who knows, maybe Alola can only take so many interdimensional portals, and as such, Hoopa just figured there's enough chaos going on there and doesn't want to be involved. The same can be said for all of the Mega Stones that are received or bought in the Let's Go games. But this does lead us to one strange instance, and that is Mewtwo having a Mega Stone. Within the movies, Mewtwo doesn't need a Mega Stone and can simply transform between the two different versions on its own, of its own volition, of its own power. But within the games, the Mega Stones for Mewtwo do exist and are either held by Giovanni in the Rainbow Rocket episode or given to us by the lost character Green from our original trio. And I've been wanting to make a video, an entire video, about the Fallers of Alola and the identity of the dead Faller that is confirmed within the Pokemon games, so keep your eye out for that, because the next video I am doing is solving the murder of the Faller in Alola. I'm going to call it probably something different, but you'll see it, don't worry. And I digress. This ultimately shows us two possibilities. One being that the Mega Stones are imported to the regions, or that these truly are different dimensions and the Mega Stones may be arriving thanks to the assistance of Hoopa and its mischief. If that is the case, then not only does this link all of the other regions and dimensions back to Hoopa, and maybe even a number of legendaries and mythical Pokemon, but it may officially give us some insight as to what other universes exist parallel to our own, which ones have Mega Evolution, and which ones were gifted to them by Hoopa. In fact, I'm willing to bet that Hoopa may not even originally exist in our universe and simply originate from a different one altogether. The only evidence we get of this is when we look at the Pokemon Adventures manga. In the manga, a character by the name of Emerald uses the soil from Mew's home as ammunition. When these soil pellets hit a Pokemon, it reminds them of their home, their origin, and calms them down even if they are in a rage, and may even allow them to be captured. When Hoopa arrives and is fired upon by these soil pellets, it has no effect whatsoever. Now, this could just mean that, Hoopa doesn't originate from Earth, at all. But it could expand into the idea that Hoopa simply is not a resident of our dimension either. After all, I'm just gonna say this. If you were some sort of mischief-causing, portal-jumping, dimensional-hopping creature with incredible power, which is supposedly supposed to be some sort of equal to the Arceus that we know of and its power, then would you stay in the dimension that you were born in? I know I wouldn't. I do also want to note, because I mentioned it earlier and almost forgot, that the concept of Deoxys having been created by the ultimate weapon, or how there are a lot of different theories surrounding the ultimate weapon firing. For Deoxys, it does state that the DNA of a space virus underwent a sudden mutation upon exposure to a laser beam and then resulted in Deoxys. The crystalline organ on this Pokemon's chest appears to be its brain. That laser beam could have very easily been the ultimate weapon itself, especially since we have this strong connection between Megastones and space, as there are meteorites that will contain Megastones or Keystones within them. There are also multiple Deoxys out there. Deoxyses, however you want to say that. And with the ultimate weapon firing into space, there's a good chance that there are many things that were unfortunate enough to get impacted by this event. Some people also believe that thanks to this great event, and since a lot of things happened within the world of Pokemon 3,000 years ago, that the firing of the weapon may have even affected Eternatus, who awoke and caused the first darkest day 3,000 years ago. Go check out my Gigantamax video that I actually just did if you want more information on all of that, because it might become vital in our future. Even more people, though, find themselves theorizing about the connection that Melmetal may have even had a play here, since it had died and split apart 3,000 years ago, and we don't know what its home region is, but that it was worshipped by ancient people. It's quite strange just how much happened all those years ago, and yet they're supposedly not confirmed to be related to each other at all. And while I'm not willing to bet Eternatus will be making a comeback, I am willing to bet that through the connections that Kalos and Hoenn have in lore, that we may be getting a couple of different things. Especially considering how AZ had seen Mega Rayquaza save Hoenn and called it the Delta, that which will save the world. And because of this, I do believe that Deoxys may also be making a return at some point within Legends ZA, whether it have a major role or a more minor role like some of the other mythicals or legendaries that we see within the previous Legends game. And as one final bet, a Hail Mary if you would, there is always the possibility that AZ is shown to have been from another universe, or Lysandre pops in from an alternate universe in which he was not a maniac, thanks to Hoopa now being a part of the larger equation now, and maybe even bringing him into our universe. Outside of this though, I believe that we have thoroughly talked about the lost lore of these games that may come back within Legends ZA. This is a shorter video, but there are a number of other videos that I do want to get out before the big release of Legends ZA, and I want to really gear up to that. One other video I have in mind is solving the many mysteries that Kalos just kind of left open. So if there are any mysteries that you can think of, or you just want to share your thoughts on all of this, whether you agree, disagree, or maybe I missed something, because I'm one person and I'm bound to, share it in the comments below. Comments and watch time are the #1 best way to help the reach of a video, in addition to hyping a video now apparently, which is a thing that you can do 3 times within the first week that a video releases. I don't know exactly how that affects a YouTube video, but right now YouTube's being weird, so all the support is appreciated. And if you'd like to go the extra mile, you can always become a member on YouTube or Patreon, get videos early, and support the channel, as you also get to hear your name at the end credits of every single video. And as one final note, if you're looking for a longer video to enjoy related to Kalos, go check out my Kalos ecology video. I go route by route and explain real life ecology that relates to Pokemon and how Kalos works as a whole. And you bet when Legends ZA comes out, I'm going to be doing an ecology video on that. But otherwise, let's go give a nice thank you to all the members of the channel. Thank you to all of our members supporting the channel, including the Gods of Hope, Clefairy 14, Heals for Life, Biggins, Vatty, Knit, Buzz, and Summer, then of our champions, Andrew, Merchants, Ghost, and Joshua, Biggins, Wilson, then all of our Knights of the Court, Vatty, Lemon, Kelsey, Hoover Covers, Luke Sassy, Crumbo, Vio, Moth Romance, Double, Shiny Gem, Sarah, Briz Boys, Fix My Nitrogen, and Krill, Final Fantasy 14, and Plow, Allen, Heals for Life, Blue, Dalek, and Warren Hemphill. Then finally, all of our wanderers of the channel, Mr. Hellhound, Yib, Super Saiyan Son, Goku, I assume that is, Emil Wickstrom, Irish, I was drunk, oh my lord. Voidy, no. Aww. Thank you all of our members of the channel, starting with the Gods of Hope, Final Fantasy 14, Heals for Life, Biggins, Vatty, Knit, Buzz, and Summer, then champions, Andrew, Merchants, Ghost, and Joshua, Biggins, Wilson, and then the Knights of the Court, Vatty, Lemon, Kelsey, Hoover Covers, Luke Sassy, Crumbo, Vio, Moth Romance, Double, Shiny Gems, Sarah, Briz Boys, Fix My Nitrogen, Krill, Fantasy 14, Plow, Allen, Heals for Life, Blue, Dalek, and Warren Hemphill. Then all of our wonders of the channel, Mr. Hellhound, Yep, Super Saiyan Son, Goku, Emil Wickstrom, Irish, I was drunk, Voidy Reaper, JC Hero, Ocean Man 7, Tavorius, Gazianberg Fossils, Ryan Schwenk, Shoot Pass Limit, Chidori, Phoenix 1, Vanny, Zamaru, Gal, Snake Sun, 520, Kagyo, Tsutsuki, Cool Breeze, Eric, Max Supreme, Shadowhawk 19, Lost Mysterio, Diswardy, Emperor, Sofian Kai, Tamarko, Zakai, Inferno, Twitch, Lydia Marie, Elder, Dennis Garcia, Lion Clan, Nathan Palmer, Sophie, Favark, The Hi Chi, Kristen Cap, Cliv, Lumica, Daniela 808, Roger McLean, Supporting Boy, Kamutalk 123, Star S, Spyro Master, Jay Gill, Abdallah Lottie, Gaming Rudes 9L707, Evil Chan, Ruby, Micah 626 Gaming, Nicole Manaskian, Kristen, Sandwich Boss, Emmy, whatever this is, Michael Stein, Alolan Figment, Meneco 2873, Sydney House, Miss Zora, Dakota Couch, Brad Sundimer, Drixel, Carl Jean, Hunter Al, Hussein Kassam, Rebecca Connell, Hune, Jaffy W, Memento Morum, Marshy, Edward Kosowski, Fenica Fox, Nerders Freeberg, Hag, Addy Cadabra, King Pine, Jack Frost, Richie Snivy, Addy C, Jacob Square, DJ Monk 23, Squidwater, Rice Smith, Gamer Bad Dragon, I Just JM, MD Horsewood, Cocktail News, Art World, Telumial, Gwendolyn, Eastgander 772, Andrew Foss, Pick Anonymous, Summon Sloth, Knock Nguyen, Ian Ray, Big and C9, Corner of the Cobbit, Sleepy Bear, Jericho, Summon Sloth, Unseelie King, The Vorians Guys, Daniel Tracy, Garrett Hoffman, Dylan Peters, Mackley Burkhart, and Heather Weisnett. Thank you all for being members of the channel. It goes a very, very long way to support the channel and content for everybody to enjoy. If you would like to become a member of the channel, get a number of different perks, and hear your name at the end of every single video as part of the credits, then become a member for as little as $3 a month and support the channel. With that then, as always, thank you guys so much for watching. It does mean the world to me. Don't do anything I want to do. Don't think I want to do. Please be nice to each other. I love you, and I'll see you next time. Bye.